Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to be with you. I'm David Richner here with Mariner Folk, and we're going back to back. This is kind of a surprise broadcast. And if you're able to listen in on this live, please join us. Mariner, would you like to say hi to those who are listening?
Hello, and happy Mother's Day coming up to all the wonderful that maybe listening in.
Absolutely, and that's why we're here, brothers and sisters. We've been inspired. Okay, we're trying to follow the influence of the Holy Ghost and the Spirit, and the idea to put together a broadcast right now instead of waiting till next Wednesday about mothers and Mother's Day, which is coming up. So we are going to be discussing motherhood. What's going on in our day and age, in our era, and then Mariner's going to give us some great insight, and hopefully those who are listening in can text us or join us and ask Mariner some questions as well. So with that being said, I think one of the main reasons, the Lord works in mysterious ways, and the Spirit can lead us and guide us and prompt us to do certain things. Of no coincidence, Tiffany America, who's a vocalist, who we actually haven't met in person, but because we share a passion for the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we do so in singing, I looked at one of her posts today, and I'm just going off the cuff here, off memory. I just know that it emphasized the importance of mothers and motherhood, and also kind of spoke about, my interpretation was the lack of respect towards mothers in our day and age. And I don't know if it's so much lack of respect or if it's just lack of attention. I personally don't see that many commercials, advertisements, promotions, anything, company promoting the sacred nature of motherhood and good mothers and parenting, and being a woman and having children is something to boast about, or be proud about, or to be joyful about, and to celebrate. And Mariner, do you see any of that in Washington, or do you see that in your life, where we live in a society that praises women for becoming mothers and being good mothers? Do we see that much where you live?
No, you know, you kind of touched on it that we're moving away from the story, right? To me, this is a big issue. Um, which we'll definitely get into later as we get into like the Egyptian things. The ancient Egyptian culture was focused on the sacred, and the modern Latter-day Saint culture also, we celebrate temples, family, gospel, things that are sacred, and we establish our lives around those things. But in the popular culture, we've taken prayer out of schools, we've stopped reading the Bible, we take the sacred out of the public sphere, and then things go really far adrift. And so they replaced it with things like feminism, where it's like, well, we're celebrating women, down with the patriarchy, support women. And to put it in terms of kind of the familiar term of yin and yang from Eastern culture, where which don't specifically mean male and female, but yang is associated with masculine, that which is hard, bright, dry, like the desert during the day. The yin is feminine, soft, moist, dark, like a swamp at night. And that becomes a polarity that you can use to define a lot of things. And if I were to ask you, which would you rather have, an endless day with no night, or an endless night with no day?
Yeah, endless day with no night, right?
Well, I mean, you wouldn't survive it very long.
On either one,
Uh,
right?
the temperature would just go up and up. It would be unbearable. Everything would be scorched, lifeless, dry. Um, you're like, well, just give me some respite. Let's turn it to night, and it would get dark and cold and unendurable in its own way. And so that is in the balance. Um, the sun rules the sky by day, the night rules the sky by night with stars. This is how God set it up. This is how God intended it. Um, is it good for man to be alone? No, let's craft a partner for him, someone to be helpmeet from the Hebrew, someone over against him. This polarity, not an opposite in the sense of like right and wrong, kind of opposite, but this duality of yin and yang.
Okay.
So feminism breaks that balance. To like, oh, the feminine is the good, the masculine is the bad, and we'll make women into, they can be CEOs, they can be in charge. Anything a man can do, a woman can do better. Uh, bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan. Um, I am woman, hear me roar, and it's like all yang without the yin. And it pushes, and a woman becoming the yang pushes the men to become the yin. Why aren't men standing up? Why are they so effeminate? Why are they cowardly? Why are they, well, that's the role you've pushed them into. If you're competing for the alpha, who's going to be the beta? And if women choose to not be beta, that they demand to be the alpha, that's how it works out. That's the natural thing. So um, if women want to be celebrated in their femininity, they need to embrace their femininity as such. If they want to be celebrated as women and mothers, then choose to find a good who can be a father and husband. Um, and the world is finding out the hard way that breaking that duality uh, is self-destructive. It's destroying the whole society.
Yeah. No, that absolutely. I think one of the biggest reasons the Spirit has kind of prompted us to talk about this today is because I think from a reverence standpoint, Mariner, you and I can we can discuss the sacred nature of motherhood, and at the same time, um, we can talk about the importance of motherhood. I'm going to give an example. My mother, Irene Domingos Richner, her family's from Greece, the Greek Orthodox. She was raised in the Greek Orthodox faith. She left the Greek Orthodox faith and joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She raised her children in a culture that she wasn't used to. It was much different. She raised us to be like the stripling warriors. I I foresee the mothers of the stripling warriors, as written in the Book of Mormon, as a mother like my mom. She was making sure that all of her children were doing what was right on a day-to-day basis. She took passion into what she was supposed to do as a mother. She wanted to make sure that all of her children were being taught the correct principles of our Father in heaven and Jesus Christ, were being taught the gospel, keeping the commandments. Now, we were not, everyone falls, right? Everyone sins, everyone makes mistakes, but this was a mother that it wasn't so much that she let us know that you made a mistake. It just, they didn't go by without, her acknowledgement and making sure that we knew that, hey, that's wrong. There is good and there is evil. There is right and there is wrong. And we knew the difference. We knew what was right and we knew what was wrong. We live in an era today where I don't think a lot of children are being taught what is right and what is wrong. Um, and this broadcast that we're doing right now is to give dedication to our mothers, to commend them, the mothers who bear children, who bring life into this world. Men never have an opportunity to deliver a child and bring life into this world. I personally don't think there's anything more sacred and more powerful as far as bringing life into this world. Motherhood to me is the most cherished position. I think it's beautiful. I think to be a woman and to bear children and to care for those children is a blessing from our Father in heaven, is a gift, is sacred, is important. I have so much value and regard towards good mothers who teach their children the correct principles. Now, I mean, my mom wouldn't even recognize me right now if I was a teenager saying these things. Um, but now that I'm older, and I am so grateful. I mean, there's a lot of things I like in this world, but I don't think there's anything more appealing to me than seeing a strong woman who loves her children, who's willing to sacrifice herself for her children, for her family. And I actually think that's why I chose to come into my mother's family, is because I had such an admiration for who she was in the premortal existence and how strong she was in her faith. And I said, "Hey, I want, I want to go into her family." And they're like, "Are you sure? Are you sure you want to go into Irene's and have her be your mother? Because it's not going to be easy. She's going to be on top of you like white on rice every day, and but anyways, I have a great respect for those mothers and for you women and that are watching this. Um, I hope that you feel of God's love and that you feel of your children's love. And mothers and motherhood, there are some women in this world who may not have the opportunity to bear children yet. Like, aha, right? Don't you we've got the millennium. There's other opportunities coming. So all women are perceived as mothers, um, and daughters of God. And so we thank you for all of your hard work. We thank you for your commitment, your dedication to your children, to raise them to the best of your ability, to make our communities better, to make our communities stronger. Even a community like can you imagine like the city of Enoch, or the stripling warriors, the mothers that they had? Can you imagine if we lived in a society where all of the mothers were like that? That would just be awesome. That would be awesome.
It would be awesome. I think of my own mother. Her name was Dorothy, which comes from Greek words meaning gift of God.
Yeah,
Um,
love it.
she came from a big family. She had 6 children, and I'm the youngest. She was such a wonderful woman. Um, I have endless admiration for her. She, um, her mother was an organist at church, and she herself learned piano and then learned organ, took organ lessons, and she became a beautiful organist. She played the organ for 50 years, and all volunteer. Um, she also played the violin. She taught me to play the cello.
That's
Um,
awesome.
she took art classes. She would paint in different styles: rose mauling, toll painting. Um, she did genealogy extensively for decades. I helped type up her 600 page book on
Wow.
her father's line, and
Oh, that's awesome.
it is awesome. She's an amazing woman. Um, there was a time when she had to work. She'd been married previously with two little children, and um, so she was a single mom and was working. And she met the man who became my dad. And as soon as they got married, she never worked again. This was her life, to not work, be a fan. And she'd cook, and I mean, she sewed. Oh, she would sew. She'd cook. I loved her blueberry pie.
Oh,
So all these talents.
nice.
She was Cub Scout leader, and involved in church, involved in school, involved in our lives, and it was wonderful. Um,
What do we call that if it's not, if I know what you're saying. You're saying that she didn't go to work. She's working every day of her life as a mother. What do
sure,
we what
she's
do
a
we
homemaker,
she's a
not
homemaker.
and homes need to be made, and someone needs to do it. And I'm glad that
Homemaker.
she chose that, and it was a joy to her. She wasn't less of a woman
No.
because she wasn't climbing the corporate ladder or something. She was she found fulfillment as a wife, a mother, a homemaker, um, serving at the church, serving in the community. Um, Jesus served. He who would be the greatest shall be the least. He who serves the most has the greatest blessings. If those are what you want, that's the way to do it. And if you're called to that, if you're called to womanhood, motherhood, and you say, "No, I'd rather be a man. I'd rather out compete the men," like, you're missing the blessings of heaven. And Babylon has no place for this. Goodness, truth, beauty. Um, it's all, sexuality and money and power and fame. I mean, my wife was telling me about a woman who um, chose to never have children because it would ruin her figure. And that, to me, that's just demonic.
Brothers and sisters, if you're just joining us, we would love to have you participate. Um, we send a link there. Mary, I would love to, have like 100 women in like a survey. And, I know there's women who would love to have children, and they try to have children and they can't have children, and they kind of go, you know, make a life, they have a life. I don't know if they look into adoption. Um, I would, are there any other options? I mean, you have adoption, right? I mean, you have foster kids, and there's a lot of people who, whether they're grandmothers or mothers, who take in other children and raise them, and those are definitely um, roles of motherhood. You even have some coaches, mentors, counselors, coaches, teachers, who the student perceives these people as their, mother, or in some cases father, as a parent, because some of these kids don't have parents. Some of these kids don't, have a mother. Since we're talking about Mother's Day, um, what and I don't want to be too harsh here, but is it safe to say that one of the greatest plans to destroy God's plan is to take away the value of motherhood? For example, if you're looking at the adversary or Satan, he wants abortion, he wants same-sex marriage, he wants um, transgenderism, sex trafficking, and he wants to destroy the value of mothers and motherhood. Is that true? Is that a game plan to
Oh,
distort motherhood, to tear it down? It's not important. I mean, don't have a lot of kids, even if you are a mother. Only have one or two. Is it safe to say, is it backed up by doctrine and scripture, that those are all things that Satan would do to try to destroy God's plan.
Yeah, and it's amazing how many different attacks there are. I mean, you mentioned a number of them. Uh, you know, destroying the idea of uh, gender or sexuality, really. Um, that women and men are distinct and they're in their own role. That they just blur that line. Um, well, you can be a mother but only have one or two um, because of world overpopulation or whatever excuse they come up with. It's like, um, the Bible says that you should have your quiver full of children. um, and granted, it's not for everybody. We're talking about themes and general rules. So, yeah, family is vital. Um,
I
to raise the
love
children well is crucial, and that's on women's shoulders. That's their responsibility.
I love big families. I mean, I hear, Joseph Smith had what, 8 or 9 children. I don't know if any of them, how many lived or what, uh, you
Only a
know,
few.
yeah. And then you have a lot of in the Polynesian culture, a lot of big families and the Catholics, and obviously in the LDS faith, big families. I mean, you look at Jacob, who had 12 sons. I think that would be awesome. I mean, I've got 7 kids and 4 boys, but I mean, I'm a teacher, coach. I'm used to having a basketball team, you know, 30 plus kids in my program that I'm responsible for, and I loved it. Um,
To give an example of how that can go wrong, we look at China with the one-child policy,
yeah,
and of course, male children are preferred, and so now you have not enough women to go around for the men who want to get married and have, and so they're all competing ferociously to find a bride, and it's causing economic problems. Um, and each child, he or she doesn't have brothers and sisters, or aunts and uncles, cousins. They have, uh, your parents, um, two sets of grandparents, and they're all depending on you to take care of them in their old age. That's a lot of responsibility. Um, and so they're totally spoiled. They're raised, as the only child. They're spoiled with everything that those parents and grandparents can give, and you have a whole generation, whole nation of these what they call little emperor syndrome. Um, they don't want to work hard. They don't want to serve military. They're spoiled, and a way to run a going to see a major collapse, over the next generation because of this. And they're trying to reverse it now. They're like, oh, well, you can have children now. Like, okay, but they don't want to. They can't afford to. They don't. They're not accustomed to it. Um, it's a hard shift to make back towards celebrating families.
yeah. There in our society, it's safe to say that there's this notion that you have to have money to have children, and I mean, I was a walk-on at University of Utah playing college basketball. I woke up at 7, went to classes from 7:30 to 12:30, basketball practice from 1 to whatever. I mean, I after basketball practice, I'd get in the car and go referee some basketball games for the city league. I mean, I was maybe making $1,000 a month. My rent was $600 a month. I had 2 kids, one on the way. So I'm a walk on. I'm not even on scholarship. 2 kids, one on the way. So I'm a testament, folks. Anyone want a debate? you don't need you don't need money to have children. You don't need money to have a family, to start a family. I will say this. I would say you have to have faith in God and you trust in the Lord. You keep the commandments, pay your tithing, and you will be blessed. you will be blessed. I mean, having a family. Um, I will say this though, today, how many people in this world outside of even Christianity, well, let's say even just as a whole, how many women are anxious to get married and start having children? Like how many are wanting to have children right away? Like, I can't wait to have a family. I can't wait to have kids. Is it safe to say within the last, I don't know, 100 years, century? I mean, we live in a complete different era. I mean, back in the 1800s, 1900s, did anybody put off marriage and having children for money? Was that like a topic? Or was
No,
that?
this change started with um, essentially the baby boom generation. And all the girls would go off to college, and there they're indoctrinated, and they have the opportunity to get a job and career. And this is like post World War II. You know, Rosie the Riveter going into the factory, helping the war effort, and then that just kind of continued, women in the workplace and became accelerated. And this feminist movement, you know, breaking through the glass ceiling, and um, you know, Dolly Parton singing "9 to 5," and this, it just became part of the culture, um, and now we're stuck with it, and we're going to have the same kind of problem as China, where all these women are waiting until their careers are over to run their to be even consider having a child or two. Um, and then they're like, well, how can I find a good man? Because again, going back to that duality, um, the good men have already moved on with their lives.
uh,
So,
brothers, and,
yeah.
brothers and sisters, if you're just joining us, we're live, and we'd love to know your thoughts and feelings and beliefs. There's no discrimination here. We have our beliefs. We're just sharing them. We have a great admiration for mothers and motherhood. And if we lived in an ideal world, um, speaking of which, city of Enoch, do we know anything about what motherhood was like in the city of Enoch? Do we know anything about what motherhood's going to be like during the millennium? Any thoughts on that, Mariner?
We're told almost nothing. one of the
Yeah.
one of the great griefs in the Book of Mormon is that we Jesus appears to the Nephites, he gives a sermon and blesses them, and then leaves, and then you jump ahead, and suddenly it's a couple hundred years later, and like, no, tell us what life was like during that time of righteousness. But let me note that one of the first things Jesus did was bless the children. And you can just imagine how that would have delighted the mothers. That the angels came down, there's a ring of fire, and Jesus praying for the children, blessing them, um, boys and girls, and they became that next generation living in righteousness, um, without rich and poor, without contention, without hostility, um, having families, children of their own, the next generation teaching them the words of Jesus, practicing the ordinances that Jesus taught them, baptism, the bread and wine, and so on. Um, and we can choose that today in our own homes, in our own communities.
I don't want to get too deep here, but I'll just share one of the blessings one that I've received here in this life is understanding that we can become like our Father in heaven, and we can have worlds without number and have posterity like the sands of the sea. And so the children that I have in this life, the 7 kids, if I give it all I got as a parent and make sure that they stay on that straight and narrow path and hold tight to the iron rod, I'll do all that I can. And in the free agency, they'll choose where they want to be, and I want all 7 of them there. Let's say all 7 of them make it, and where they're standing on the right hand of the Lord Jesus Christ, and they make it to the celestial kingdom. I feel like that would be a great joy to me, knowing that my posterity started here in this world, and that my children had the opportunity to experience this telestial state, and see the return of the Lord, and we'll have that experience together for forever. And as they become like our Father in heaven and create worlds without number and have posterity like the sands of the sea. And so I guess what I'm getting at is one of my great joys, in this Mother's Day is is having children, having a posterity, having a family, and receiving great joy. I think eternal families is going to be my eternal joy. Seeing my posterity, my children have children. I'm a grandpa for the first time. Um, you know, little Mason Richner, just little blonde hair, blue eye kid, little chubby, just the cutest. I mean, it's like, wow, we get a taste of what it's like to establish a posterity. I mean, we get to experience what it's like to be like our Father in heaven a little bit, a little taste of what it's like. And it gives me great joy. So we couldn't do that without mothers, right? We couldn't do that without God and his plan of salvation. We can't, as men, we need comforters. We need a wife. We need a wife who is a good mother of our children, who raises our children to make sure that they stay on the straight and narrow path. I mean, it's a part of who I am, right? It's a part of who we are. Motherhood, mothers, as men, we should be honoring these daughters of God and cherishing them and helping them. And I don't think there's a question for anyone that knows me that knows that I value women and motherhood, and especially those who teach their children the correct principles. Now, does that mean that I don't like women who are mothers who do a poor job or who abandon their children? Well, we're supposed to love everyone, but I do have an issue with mothers who neglect their kids or who quit and who give up and who stop valuing their role as a mother, and they don't think it's important. It's beyond. It makes me more than just sad. There's a little bit of upsetness there, a little bit of kind of feeling like the Lord in the temple with the whip. It's like, are you kidding me? Why are why are we giving up on these children? I mean, I don't know. I obviously have and it's my career in education and teaching and working with kids, but I have a great love for helping children become the best that they can become, and they need good mothers. Our society, our world needs good mothers. So you good mothers out there, happy Mother's Day. We love you. We appreciate you. Keep it up. Keep being a great mother. Keep prioritizing, your marriage and then your children and being a mother, and I don't know. I just I'm going to kind of switch tones here a little bit because Mariner has some powerful stuff for us to share. Where did motherhood come from? Why is motherhood important? What's the essence? Do we have a heavenly mother? What, Mariner? Let's break it down for us.
Yeah.
Why don't you share with us the real value of motherhood and where it came from, and why it's so important to us?
Yeah, going back to that concept of the duality of the the masculine and feminine in tension. Um, I'm a better man because my mother was such a good mother.
Absolutely.
I'm a good man because my father was a good father. And I'm saddened by those who are raised missing one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I
because,
agree.
uh, you know, even people like the woman I recently married, she was a single mother for a good chunk, um, and she had to take on the masculine and the feminine in the family. She had to be the mother and the father roles for her children, and that's hard. Um, at a time you might want to be nurturing, she had to be the disciplinarian, and back and forth. And it leaves the children confused. Like, what's my role? And it's so these things should be celebrated in their roles. Um, and yes, a lot of men and fathers um, are not holding up their sacred obligations either, um, and that should be um, judged and corrected societally. Um, and I think it should be, um, like shotgun things. If you get the girl pregnant, well, you better make it right. Uh, follow up on your responsibilities and take care of the child. Um, and now, to a large extent, we have big government that's taken over a lot of that role to um, guarantee safety programs for everybody, and so the men don't have to be responsible, and the women don't need to find a responsible man, and so a lot of the rates of fatherlessness is through the roof nowadays in America. Um, at least the children being born, and the like in Europe, the um, population numbers are just going down. And anyway, so we need that balance: sacred femininity, sacred masculinity.
Well, and there's a history throughout the world. If you start with Adam and Eve, and you read the scriptures, so and so begat so and they so and so begat so and it's always through the line of the men. Obviously, none of these people exist if there's not children being born. But what motherhood was historically and the sacred nature behind it, I don't know, it just sounds so appealing to me. It sounds so attractive to me to have that honor, honor your father and your mother. Don't speak to your mother that way. I wish I had the ability to. I don't know. It just seems so heavenly to where there's no disobedience, no contention, no sassiness, no talking back to the mom, no arguing with the mom. I mean, as a man and as a husband, I feel like I want my wife protected from the
Yeah,
world. I want her protected from the world. I want her protected from my kids. Don't ever speak that way to your mother. Don't ever dishonor your mother. Be obedient. Be quickly, what's that song? Quickly I'll obey. Dun, dun,
yes,
I'm trying to, when my mother calls me. I mean, there's such a good spirit there. There's such a good feeling there. Quickly I'll obey. Um, Anything that's rebellious from a child towards a parent is not of God. And my plea to the youth is cherish your mother, cherish your father. But today's Mother's Day, so we're talking about mothers. I mean, and that's what life's all about, right? I mean, if I could go back and be a kid again, I would be completely different, right? So that's why we're in this world, is to learn. So children, don't be too hard on yourself, but try to be mature enough to listen to these words and to understand that you're hearing this from an example, from someone that was not the best son, and wishes that I would have given more praise, more honor, and gratitude to my mother, and respect. Um, and now this is my testimony and my witness, before angels around us, that anything's possible. Anybody can change. Anyone can, if you've got a poor relationship with your mother, or you got a poor relationship with your father, it can change for the better. It can improve, and that's what our Father in heaven wants. He wants us to love our parents. He wants us to, you know, love our mother and do what she asks us to do. Um, where did what do we know about the history of motherhood in scriptures and throughout the world, Mariner? Is there any evidence or anything that's spoken of about in any of the ancient civilizations about the sacred nature of motherhood, or were they not important? Were they not a significant role in societies and in other civilizations?
The oldest religions or religious expressions that they find in archaeology are feminine, little fat goddess figures. Um, and the earliest religions were more matriarchal. The societies were centered on the women raising the children. The men would go out, hunt, gather. Um, and then as things became more agrarian, you have the development of hierarchies where you have kings and priests that govern from a central place, and standing armies and such. Um, and then the gods reflect that. So you have Zeus sitting on the mountaintop, governing humans from heaven. Um, he was a patron of humans, having created mankind, and he was responsible to watch over them. Um, his wife, who was also his sister, Hera, represented um, the wife role, and she was very jealous. Um, and that was celebrated as her sacred jealousy. When Zeus would go off and have flings with various women, um, she would get angry and take vengeance. Even Hercules, in the Greek, his name is Heracles, which means the glory of Hera. And so he was named to kind of, she wasn't Hera's son, it was Zeus's son by some other woman, but he was named the glory of Hera to kind of appease her. It didn't work. She ruined his life. Um, but and that's the hero's saga, how he overcame that in the end.
What
Um,
what was this sister that I sent you a text, and it was a YouTube video? Could you share with us a little bit about that and what that was and who that gentleman was and what was his name? Jared what?
yeah, so that was Jared Rubel Kaba, and he was invited to give a presentation for um, uh, a women's conference on sacred femininity, and his YouTube video, an hour long, is called "Mother, Daughter, Queen, and Priestess in Ancient Egypt." Um, yeah, his interests correspond a lot with my own, and studying the ancient religions, ancient languages, and things. And he's focused on Egypt. Um, I've focused more on like learning Hebrew and some of these, but I do have an interest in the Egyptian culture. Um, and so he did a deep dive there that I enjoyed. He began by talking about the goddess Nun. Um, the letter, what we would call the letter N in hieroglyphics, is a squiggle showing like water. And the name Nun, she was the goddess of the primordial waters, the waters of chaos. She represented potentiality, and it struck me that um, the masculine then becomes the aspect of creating the particular. So just like we know with genetics, um, a woman, when she bears a child, it could be a boy or a girl. She has the X chromosome, and then it's the father who determines whether that is a boy or a girl. He produces the X or the Y chromosome. And she cannot produce a son on her own. She has no particular Y chromosome to do that. So even if she were to, like some species of animals or insects and such, um, can produce clones, female offspring, parthenogenesis, but they can't produce sons. It requires a father to do that. Um, and then in the Egyptian, she has a daughter and a son. So she has Nut, which is a goddess of the starry heavens, and she's portrayed as her body, her naked body, arching over, looking down. Um, the idea of souls passing through her mouth and then being reborn again through her body. Um, and beneath is her husband Geb, the god of earth. And this is a reversal. Often, like with Zeus, the masculine is of the sky, and the earth, in that case, Demeter. Her name is literally mother goddess, Deus Mater, god mother. Demeter was the goddess of the earth, and she brings forth the plants and the food. But in the Egyptian, it was reversed, where the goddess is of the heavens and the god, the masculine god, is beneath on the earth. And there's a lot of that kind of reversal in Egypt. In their story, it is, and it's mentioned in the book of Abraham, it is the woman who first discovers the land that it was a swamp and under the water, and there were plants growing up, and she finds the first dry land and establishes the kingdom there. Her son becomes the first pharaoh, but it's matriarchal in that sense. Even though they ruled with men, their power comes from the woman.
I don't think there's too much education going on in our K-12 like this. I don't think there's an emphasis on this in schools. Do you? Do you think anyone's talking about the history of motherhood and like kind of like what you're explaining as a positive? Are our kids getting any sort of education in their? I mean, I'm a teacher, and I'm saying I don't remember anyone ever talking about the history of the world and how important mothers were and how civilizations were commenced because of a woman.
Yeah, no. Um, to tie it in to something we're more familiar with, if we're looking the Bible, there are, in my understanding, three primary creation stories in the Bible, and this is something that is poorly understood. um, let's see. So Genesis chapter 1 is our first creation story, and that's kind of obvious. Says, in the beginning, God created, right? And let's see, I need a better.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us while Mariner is looking this up, if you're having any thoughts, comments, inspirational ideas that you can participate, contribute to this broadcast, please do so. We are discussing Mother's Day and the importance of motherhood. Historically, we've gone over some ancient civilizations where you talked about in Egypt. Um, we'd love to hear what your thoughts are on motherhood. Maybe you have a story about your own mother that you want to share that's touching and would be something we could all enjoy as well. Go ahead, Mariner.
All right. So if you're looking at Genesis chapter 1, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. This is this account is drawn from the Egyptian tradition, but it's through the lens of the Israelites. The name for God here is Elohim. In the beginning, Elohim created the heaven and the earth. The earth was, in Hebrew it says, tohu and bohu, translated without form and void. It's empty, desolate. It says, darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. The word here for deep is, in Hebrew, tahom, which corresponds to the Sumerian Tiamat. This occurs in Egyptian also, where the T at the end of a name makes it feminine. So Tahom is masculine, Tiamat is feminine. And in Sumerian culture, Tiamat was the mother of dragons. And she was the goddess of the ocean, the salt water. Her consort was Absu, from which you get the modern word abyss. He was the deep waters that were pure, drinkable. And so that word becomes borrowed into Hebrew, tahom, meaning the deep waters. And so then in this account, the deep waters are already there. Deep, dark waters. The Spirit of God moves upon it. God brings forth light to counter the darkness. He brings forth the dry land as a counter to the waters. But they were already there. The waters, rich with potentiality, like Nun, that was already there in this account. So the idea that in the beginning there was nothingness and God created from nothing, that's not in the text.
Can I ask you a question about the whole taking a rib from Adam to create woman? Is there a reason why that took place? Like why? I mean, if men and women existed in the premortal existence, why wasn't man and woman just placed on Earth together at the same time? Is there a symbolism there? Is there wisdom that's being taught to us by saying they took a rib from Adam to create a woman's body? Because we know the spirits existed. It must be strictly symbolism, right?
That's a good question. I'll get to that in a minute.
Okay, sorry, didn't mean to. Detract from what you were saying. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so in this account we have duality. Let's see. Verse 5, the light is day, the darkness is night. That's the first day. Verse 6, firmament in the midst of the waters, dividing the waters from the waters. And this is not continents dividing the oceans. It is actually the sky dividing the waters above the heavens and the waters upon the earth.
That stood out to me yesterday when I was at the temple. The waters were divided from the heaven and the earth.
Yeah.
I didn't even understand what that meant. Like there's waters that were attaching us to heaven.
Yeah, and this is shown also in Facsimile 1 in the Book of Abraham, and usually not explained well, and most people don't. It's so outside of our context, but was certainly Egyptian, where Um, the Earth has think of it like a glass bowl over the Earth, beyond which are the stars, swimming in this celestial ocean. Um, and you see, in
Interesting.
facsimile too, boats with stars on them up above,
Hmm.
because that's, and even in the Egyptian temple in the Holy of Holies, they would have not the Ark of the Covenant, a box, but they would have a boat. The God's throne is the boat that rides through the sky, um, and the God of the sun, he rules by day, and then at night he's circling under the earth and comes back around in the dawn. And so that dawning becomes a celebration of the return of God, the return of light. Um, but yeah, in any modern sense, we don't think of waters above the clouds. Like we
Yeah.
don't. But even the term astronaut, like nautical, you sail through the stars. Um, so
Hmm.
that those ideas persist, and that's where they come from. They're ancient concepts.
Interesting.
Um, so verse 7, you have that division with the firmament. The firmament is um, in the sky. And verse 8, he called the firmament heaven. So that's that glass bowl. Verse 9, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together, and let the dry land appear. So that earlier division of the waters was not the continents. Now it comes to continents. That's not till the third day. Um, then the lights in the firmament. So what does he do with that firmament? He puts the sun and the moon um, with the stars. And as I mentioned before, uh, the stars were already there. He didn't create the stars, but the stars were there. Um,
I thought the stars were also created. I thought you know, the lesser light should rule the night, right? Which is the moon, and then the stars were created around the moon.
yeah, I was explaining to someone else recently. Maybe I'm confusing the two. Um, but yeah, if you look carefully at the King James text, Genesis 1:16, God made two great lights. The greater light to rule the day, we understand that to be the sun. The lesser light to rule the night, that's the moon. And then
He
he
made
made,
the
and those words
stars.
are in italics. Do you see that? He made the stars also. And the word he made is in italics because it's not in the Hebrew, but the translators added it in to complete the sentence. But it literally isn't in the Hebrew. The
So they're
Hebrew
not.
says,
So
the
they were
lesser light,
already. Go ahead.
the lesser light to rule the night and the stars. That's what it says in the Hebrew. And
Interesting.
so for people to take this one verse that mentions stars and to say, oh, God made the stars on this fourth day of creation, and before that there existed no stars in the cosmos. Like, no. All it's saying is that for this firmament, you placed the sun to rule the day and the moon to rule the night with the stars, the starry night. That's what it says in the Hebrew.
Yeah, it's interesting because that really stood out to me yesterday in the temple as well, where it was like, wait a minute, he didn't. So you just clarified he didn't. The stars were already made, which makes sense because he's created worlds without numbers, and so
Right. Yeah, we're not the
those are
first.
yeah, those are the stars we see, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So he didn't create; those were already created. Those were
Yeah.
already there, so that makes sense.
And, even if we take it as a mythology and say, well, God could have, put that glass dome and populate it with stars. But that's not even what it says. It just says the night and the stars. The moon
That,
rules the night and the stars. So there is no place where it says outside of the English translation, that God created stars here in this chapter. We can presume they were pre-existent. It doesn't really say, but that's kind of my point. And for people to say, no, it says he made the stars, well, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's why I studied Hebrew, so I could learn for myself to read the text.
I didn't know that. So I didn't know that you spoke Hebrew. That's awesome.
I don't speak it, I'm not fluent, but I've learned how to read biblical Hebrew.
Well, that's fantastic.
So then,
Yeah, go ahead.
getting into the man and woman, verse 26, and God, and this is Elohim again, and it's every place where you see God in this chapter, it's translating the Hebrew Elohim, which is itself a plural word. The I am ending makes it a masculine plural. So Joseph Smith said you should translate it as gods, plural, all the way through. And it is translated that way in the book of Abraham as well. So we can read it as the gods said, let us make man, Adam, in our image after our likeness.
Well, and that would be God the Father, Jesus Christ. Does that include Michael?
Well,
or is that the
according to the book of
God?
Abraham, that's all the noble and great ones. So
this is the gods like our Father in heaven's brothers.
well, it
I
doesn't
don't.
say.
Yeah,
And
I
it
don't know.
uses God here in a singular, except in this verse where it says let us.
Okay.
Um, and that's a plural pronoun, but it usually uses a singular pronoun. Image and likeness. If we jump to Genesis 2, and my computer's not wanting to. Okay.
I mean, if they're creating man in God's likeness, they've got to create women in the likeness of a heavenly mother.
Presumably. Let's see. Genesis 4.
I mean,
Genesis.
I don't want to sidetrack things. My mind gets going because I think I've heard discussions about the 1/3 of the host of heaven who followed Satan, and they said many of those who followed him were women and like daughters, the daughters of God, because they had a great deal of love and compassion for Lucifer as their older brother. I don't know. I'm not even sure where I had that conversation with somebody.
So this language of image and likeness, if you jump to chapter 5 of Genesis, verse 3, even verse 1, this is the book of the generations of Adam. That's a formal introduction. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him. Male and female created he them and blessed them and called their name Adam in the day when they were created. And as a side note, the word for the red earth is Adamah. In Hebrew, Edom is red. Adamah is a feminine word meaning soil to suggest the red earth. And is a masculine that earth. So the male Adam came from that female earth. That's right there in the language of Hebrew. Verse 3, and Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in likeness after his image, and he called him Seth.
It's kind of interesting right there. He lived 130 years before he had his first son.
Well, his third son.
Third one.
Cain and Abel first. But after the death of Abel, he brings forth another son in his image and likeness. And what do you understand that to mean?
Image and likeness of Adam or God?
That Seth was in the likeness and image of Adam.
He must have looked like his dad.
Yeah. And the Hebrew words there suggest like the form, the shape. Like
You have some sons that look like their dads, right? Like, oh, you look like your dad.
Yeah, we'll say he's a spitting image of his father.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the language, that's how those words are used right there in chapter 5. And that's the same words used in chapter 1. Um, Let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and the fowl of the air and over the cattle, over all the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God made he him, male and female, created he them, and blessed them, caused them to be fruitful, multiply, have dominion, um, and everything good. So that's the language here in chapter 1. Um, there's no mention of Eve, but it says mankind is created male and female in the physical image of God, image and likeness, like it's expressed. um, and then the story continues into the next chapter for 3 more verses.
I guess we can touch on that real quick and just say, look, you were created either a man or woman. When you were at birth, you were a man or you were a woman. There's no transgenderism.
Yeah.
Just want to throw that out there.
Sure. And it was, and they're both in the image of God. It's not like man was the image of God, woman came later. In this chapter, in this account, this Egyptian style version, they're made together equally.
Was the gender? I mean, but the gender is in existence as spiritual beings, right? I mean, God did create spiritual women and spiritual men.
Yes. Or, well, it doesn't explain it. It just mentions male and female.
Okay. I guess what I'm saying is that, some people will try to say, well, I feel like I'm a woman. And it's like, okay, we're all God's spirits men. And then, even thinking about that hurts my head, but all spirits were men. And then, you come to earth and he changes you to a woman. No, no. So if you were born a woman and you're like, well, I feel like I'm masculine and I'm a man. No, you were created as a spiritual being before the world was created as a woman, and as a man. We were children of God as spiritual beings created to become such here in this world, to be placed, your spirit would be placed into a woman's body because you are a spiritual woman created spiritually first. I mean, can you imagine if our world would talk like this and have these type of discussions, and parents were teaching their children, like, sorry, sweetie, you were born a woman and you are to be a woman. That's how God made you.
Well, even if you believe in, let's say, reincarnation, and that you've been incarnated into multiple lifetimes, sometimes as a man, sometimes as a woman, this is your opportunity. Whatever you are now, embrace it.
Don't
change
it.
You're born into a Catholic family, celebrate that, grow up Catholic, uphold the traditions of your father. If you're converted to something else, that's fine. But if you're born Buddhist, Buddhist family, celebrate in that. And take these opportunities. I think we lost David here for a minute. There. I'm not hearing your voice yet.
No, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay,
Sorry.
there.
I'm here. I was just thinking, like, when you're talking, I could focus on you by pushing this button.
Oh, I see.
It's just kind of it's a tab that I'm discovering as you're talking.
Exploring. Yeah. So I'm just encouraging people to celebrate their given God and then build on it. So that's the first creation account. that we have in the Bible. The second begins in chapter 2, verse 4. And just as I read in chapter 5, these are the generations of Adam. Here we have in verse 4, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth. And this is a formal introduction. This is really where the chapter should. And this account is Sumerian in style. And so, we just had the account, and then it says, these are the generations of the heaven and the earth, and the day the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Who is the Lord God? This is not the same expression as Elohim. This is what is translated as Lord in caps is Jehovah.
Yeah.
The day Jehovah Elohim, and then it uses that name Jehovah throughout this chapter. So this is a new text, a new God, a new story. Verse 5, every plant of the field before it was in the earth, God had not caused it to rain, there was not man. Wait, what do you mean there wasn't? We just heard that story. Well, this is a totally new story. And it gives a different account. Not 7 days of creation, but God causes a mist to rise up and then forms man, who he puts in the garden, which apparently was already planted. I mean, there's a lot that we're missing here. But this focuses on man being put in charge of the garden. He uses the name Eden for the garden, which comes from a Sumerian word for the plateau around the city where you could have your garden planted, beyond which you have the wilderness, the wild places. And in the Sumerian account, you have the main gods who have lesser gods to serve them, and the lesser gods get annoyed because they don't want to work all the time. And so the gods craft from their own blood these mortal humans to take over the work of those lesser gods. And one of them was named Adapu. I don't think we really have time to get into that story, but there are direct parallels to this account. And it speaks of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And this is before Eve. So this comes along. God says, here's all these animals. Adam names them all, but couldn't find a companion for him. God forms one for him on flesh. And Adam says, this is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, in Hebrew, Isha, because she was taken out of a man, Ish. So even the words are parallel. That's not true in every language, but
the animals were all placed on Earth as male and female, which is interesting.
Sure.
There was no male grizzly bear, and then a female grizzly bear was a rib was taken from the bear, and so none of the animals, right. None of the female animals went through what Eve went through. As far as we know, they were all just placed. Beasts of the fields were placed on Earth as male and female. They were already. It's kind of interesting. I mean, I don't know. Not that it's a big deal, but.
So which one's true? Because in the previous chapter, God created them male and female. But the second chapter, he created only man, Adam. And then kind of as an afterthought, I guess we need to make something companionable for him.
Is it good for man to be alone? And no, it's not good for man to be alone. Have we experienced that?
There's wisdom in both accounts, which is why they're in the Bible. Yeah. And there's a third account, which I'll get into momentarily. And to say, well, which one's true? Which one's the real history? Well, none of them are historical in the modern sense. Um, they're they're mythologies. They're designed as like the way we have Aesop's fables, and the fox is trying to get the grapes, and it's like, well, what's his name? When was he born? Well, it's not a literal fox. it's a story. The story is true. That's why we tell the fables. They have moral value. Jesus gave many parables. A woman lost a coin. What was her name? What day of the week was it? No, that's the point. It's not historical. It's mythical. But that doesn't make it less true or less real. It's in a different way. And this is why in the temple we celebrate, as Latter-day Saints, the creation account drawn, well, we draw from both first and second chapters here of Genesis. Days of creation, creation of Adam and Eve as a secondary creation. And we give them those names and things, but those are Hebrew names. What was Adam's actual name? Presumably he had one, and it would have been
Michael.
In some pre-Hebrew name. Michael is a Hebrew word. It's a compound from Michael, who is like God.
There you go.
It's a beautiful name, but was that his true name, the name that he was given? Or that's just the name we have through the Hebrew tradition. Like I was saying in Sumerian, his name would have been Adapa. Was that his? That's an older name. Is that his true name? Well, that's Sumerian. We don't know. It hasn't been revealed to us. It's none of our business, really. That doesn't matter. So we call him Adam, call her Eve, which is from a Hebrew word meaning life, cheva.
See, and I think the more that we understand this big picture can help us value motherhood, right? Women and why they're and so important and why God created them to do what they're called to do. I mean, it's good to understand this big picture and to hear, what you're sharing so that we can value God's plan. I mean, it's a beautiful plan. The plan of salvation is very important and very beautiful. I do want to touch before we go, Maren. I do want to touch on the idea of a heavenly mother. Are we? And I don't want to get. I mean, this is our broadcast, so we can talk about it.
Let me go for a few minutes into the next phase, and then maybe I can answer some of that, or at least be a prelude. So we won't have time for some of the Egyptian stuff, but I'll get into, from which I mean the Book of Abraham. But let's go for a moment into Proverbs. The third creation account in the Bible is not, sadly, Genesis chapter 3. It's scattered throughout, and it's the Canaanite creation story. And you get bits and pieces throughout Psalms, Proverbs, Isaiah makes reference to it, others make reference to it because of their culture. But we don't have a formal laying out of the story. And it's similar to kind of the Greek Zeus on the mountain. The two enemies on the mountain are Yam, who is the chaotic world, and Mot, who is death. But if we go to Proverbs, and I'll begin in chapter 3. We'll often hear Proverbs quoted for Mother's Day because it has some language celebrating women. And Um, God as Elohim has a feminine counterpart, often called the Shekinah, the glory of the Lord. Um, and here, which is a feminine word, has an AH ending, the ending, Shekinah. Um, Also, the word Chokhmah, which means wisdom, is a feminine word. So, this feminine, I'll say, uh, was there with the beginning. And that it says in the chapters, uh, Proverbs 3:13, happy is the man that findeth wisdom, and the man that gets understanding. It's better than gold and silver. She is more precious than rubies. Length of days is in her right hand, and her left hand riches and honor. It is hers to give long life and prosperity. Her ways are pleasant and peaceful. She is a tree of life to them that lay hold on her. And happy is everyone who retaineth her. By wisdom, by her, founded the earth. Understanding, he established the heavens. By his knowledge, the depths are broken up, and the clouds drop down dew. Um, so that's creation language. And this is elaborated in chapter 8 of Proverbs. Um, where it begins by introducing wisdom in verse 1 of chapter 8. Does not wisdom cry and understanding put forth her voice? She stands at the top of the high places. She cries at the gate. And then verse 6, here I will speak of excellent things. The opening of my lips shall be right things. And this is wisdom speaking. Receive my instruction, not silver, and knowledge rather than gold, for wisdom is better than rubies. Counsel is mine. I love them that love me, and honor with me. My fruit, again like the tree, my fruit is better than gold. Verse 22, the Lord possessed me in the beginning of his way, before his works of old. Um, the word possessed here is kana, which is also the root of the name Cain, where Eve got or acquired a son. So she named him Cain. That's this word here. The Lord got me, acquired me, begot me, perhaps. In the beginning of his way, before his works of old, I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning, or ever the earth was. There were no depths, no fountains of water, no mountains, and so on. Verse 30, then I was beside him as one brought up with him. I was daily his delight, rejoicing always before him. So hearken to me, blessed is he that listens to me. Whosoever findeth me findeth life, and shall obtain favor of Jehovah. He that sinneth against me wrongeth his own soul. All they that hate me love death. So this is strong language, and it's very much a creation story, celebrating this divine wisdom, feminine quality, who was, if not necessarily his wife, doesn't say his wife here, but at least like a daughter, always his light before his face. And I would say the same tree appears in Lehi's dream, the white tree with the white fruit that is desirable above all things. And when Nephi says, well, what does a tree mean? And he's given a vision of whom?
I don't know.
The angel says, look, and he looks and he beholds a virgin, and she brings with a child. It's not
That's right. That's right.
And the angel says, now do you understand the tree? He's like, oh, yes, of course. Why? Because the tree is this wisdom. Uh, she's given the name Asherah. She's a Canaanite goddess, but also the name was used by the Israelites.
So the
Um,
symbolism of the tree is a woman, a virgin.
yes, the Virgin, specifically um, the Virgin Mother Goddess. So, so Mary, the mother of Jesus, represents that mythology in the flesh. Nephi would have recognized that mythology. So for
Hmm.
him, the tree makes sense. And that same tree of light, the white tree, is the menorah, the candelabra in the temple. And the light of the tree was wisdom, and the oil that was poured into the tree was wisdom, and the loaves and the wine were representations of wisdom, and the incense that was in that same room offered on the coals was wisdom. So this is all aspects of this goddess aspect right there in the presence of the most holy place.
Hmm.
You enter through that to enter into the presence of the Father. But that became lost um, and was no longer celebrated with the second temple after the Temple of Solomon, at least not in that way. And even in Jeremiah, he complains about the women who were baking cakes to the goddess, and this is the goddess. And the people were lamenting. They said, we've always worshipped the goddess, and we were fine, but now you force us to worship only the god, and now we've lost our nation. So there was a deep celebration of this goddess by the Israelites for a long time, and also the priests of Baal that Elijah fought against. Uh, the priests of Ash. He didn't kill them. He killed the priests of Baal. So rid of the false father god and keep the mother god. Um, there's a whole lot of interesting things going on.
I think it's neat if we lived in a society that honored, that spoke like this, that valued, you know, I I guess what I'm saying is it would be neat if our kids, if all of our kids in this world were taught what you just taught us, what you just, if all children knew what it's, basically all children would listen to this broadcast and hear what you have to say and accept it as absolute truth and start living by these principles, by honoring their mother, understanding her value, her purpose, and each kid's understanding their value and their purpose and who they are and who they belong to and where they came from. It's kind of
That's one thing that I respect about Catholicism and related um, religions. Um, this veneration of Mary, that she's called the Queen of Heaven, and then the Mother of God, um, and so she becomes a strong type, like right there with Jesus and the Father. It's kind of a trinity of family. In fact, we talk about the silver, the Holy Mass too, the Joseph and Jesus. Um, so they're at the core of Catholicism, which I don't entirely agree with creation, but I respect approach.
well, there's a great deal of respect. That's why we don't talk about her. We don't pray to Mary. We don't, because out of respect, right? Out of a sacred nature. Um, we don't hear a lot about our Heavenly Mother. We don't hear a lot about, I think for a reason, right? To protect. I mean, Jesus Christ didn't have a wife, right?
Maybe
But
New
the no,
Testament doesn't speak of one, but
no children.
the New Testament doesn't speak of it.
But you're saying it could. I mean, if he did, which I don't. Yeah, there's nothing that's spoken about it. It's kept sacred. It's kept quiet. You know,
Yes.
I see. I love that. I love the protection of the woman, and now it's like every kid in the world, you know, seems to talk back and be sassy to their mom, and that's just one more thing that to try to destroy the family.
I'm
But
reminded
we've
of in the Greek Orthodox Church, um, they're different from the Roman Catholic regarding Mary. They don't call her the Mother of God. They call her the Theotokos, the God bearer. Um, but God cannot have a mother, so she simply brought him into mortality. But she's not like she created God, you know.
no,
So they make that distinction in their language, whereas the Catholics call her Queen of Heaven, Mother of God, and put her at this very divine level.
yeah. I wonder why they say mother of God and not wife of God.
Well, Mary wasn't the wife of God.
Right. No, I guess what I'm saying is why isn't there any reference to a wife of God?
Oh, well, Asherah was the wife of Jehovah and dwelt with
Wait,
him on the
who's
mountain.
this?
And
Who's this?
Asherah,
That's the wife of Jesus Christ or
no,
Jehovah?
the wife of Elohim. Well, of Jehovah. Um,
So
in
you're
the
saying
old in the old Canaanite style Israelite tradition. But
so?
that became pushed away when um, the religion was reformed to be more monotheistic, strictly monotheistic. Um, Elohim and Jehovah became one being. The Father and the Son became one God. There was no room for a wife. So um, this
Hmm,
Israelite God takes on some feminine characteristics, and even Jesus himself kind of incarnates some of these. He's spoken of as having of being the wisdom and the power. Well, the wisdom is the feminine and the power is the masculine. So Jesus takes both roles, but in a broader sense, um, if you're open to the older ideas, then there is in man the wisdom and the power seated at male and female throne.
kind of breaking up there, Mariner. Are you hearing that?
Now, things are fine on my end,
Okay.
uh, but just to repeat that if you celebrate the older idea that the wisdom as masculine and or excuse me, the wisdom as feminine, the power as masculine, are the goddess and the god seated upon the throne together.
Hmm,
And that's largely what we celebrate as Latter day Saints, that men and women will be hereafter kings and queens, priests and priestesses, seated
right.
upon the throne with the Father, sharing all things that He has. And all we have to do is be willing to give up all things for His sake.
Yep.
And for some women, that may be a calling to humble themselves, choose to embrace motherhood, femininity, submission to their husbands, and have that servant role so that they can be exalted as in that reversal that Jesus talks about. He who would be the greatest needs to become the least.
Right. Right. Well, we've been going here for about an hour and a half almost.
Yes. And I could do another hour just on Abraham, but another time perhaps.
Yeah. No. Let's do that some other time. Well, thank you, Mariner. Any closing remarks as far as with Mother's Day and everything? I mean, I hope those who have been listening to this and have made it this far. This is all in tribute to mothers and happy Mother's Day. And we want everyone to know that this, motherhood And being a woman and being proud to be a woman and to have children and to be a mother is something that is of God and of His power and of our purpose. Kind of the plan of salvation, the purpose in life for a woman is to understand where you came from. I think first and foremost, some people don't even know why we're here, or where we came from, or who are we. I think it's kind of clear with what Mariner said who we are, who we all are, and where we've come from, and that we should honor that and always remember that and never question where we came from or who we are and who our Father in heaven is. Any closing remarks, Mariner? Anything that you'd like to share?
If you do have that question, ask your Father in heaven. He will reveal to you your value, your destiny, His love for you as you are. Um, you don't need to say, I'm a person because I'm a woman, or I'm less because I'm childless or unmarried. Um, if you seek righteousness, your value is beyond rubies, and if you embrace your womanhood, you'll be as a tree of life, offering refreshment to all those who come seeking from you. And you have special gifts and roles to perform that the men around you don't have, cannot do. And even among women, um, a lot of women are not righteous. And to be a righteous woman is a pillar of the community. And society, we're seeing it crumbling in part because the women have um, not been celebrating their sacred roles. We will return to that necessarily, and it'll be wonderful for the women, for the men, for the children to have loving wives and mothers in the home.
Well, thank you, Mariner. I cannot wait. I know I meant to live in a city of Enoch or the millennium. I love excellence, becoming perfected in Christ. I love the man and woman connection, husband and wife. That's a sacred and powerful bond that God has allowed us to partake in and participate in. And I can't wait for all of its power to live in all of God's power, to live in all of his blessings and all that He has for us. I mean, this life is difficult, and we're definitely going to have a grateful heart without the adversary tempting us and pulling us down, and when he's bound for a seasoned man, what a breath of fresh air that's going to be. Where a couple can lift each other up and praise each other and love each other and not have any jealousy, envy, or contention or anger, or feel inadequate or feel insecure or feel incompetent. None of those things exist. We realize who we are and where we came from and what we're meant to do. Those still listening to this broadcast, thank you for listening. Share your thoughts about what motherhood means to you. Clearly, it means a lot to Mariner and I, and we've spent about an hour and a half here to commend and recognize mothers and motherhood, and we hope that you all have a special Mother's Day and your children take care of you and let you know how much they love you and appreciate all that you do. And let's continue to praise women and motherhood, which is arguably the most sacred role any woman can have is being a mother and having children and or caring for others as a mother. As if it's an adoption or foster parent or a mentor, a role model, a sister in the faith who helps a minister. If you have a ministry and assignment and you're a sister in the faith and you care for another family, I know many sisters in our ward who are very generous and very loving and very caring for other families that aren't even theirs. I think that's the essence of motherhood, right? I think, that love, that Christ-like love, charity comes from motherhood as well. Mariner, thanks for all that you've shared. We'll do more next week. I know you already
It's
gave
a
your
pleasure.
close. Yeah. Any other last lots, or are we good?
No, thank you for this venue, and yeah, I pray for each of the men and women hearing this to feel God's love and to celebrate the good souls in their lives and celebrate their mothers.
Well, we share these things with all of you, brothers and sisters, and we do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
And let's feel free to share this. Maybe send this to a sister or a mother or anybody that you feel may be moved or appreciate this broadcast. I don't know of too many broadcasts like this that praise women and lift them up and acknowledge their greatness. Have a good night, everybody. Take care. God bless. Love you all. Bye bye. Thanks, Mariner. We'll see you.
Okay.